sometimes it can be hard to relate to a psalm like this. He says, I'm being hunted down like a lion is after me. And you can maybe be tempted to think, well, I mean, have I felt like that? I don't know. Or maybe you're tempted to think, well, this is a good psalm for the persecuted church, which it is. Maybe this is a good psalm for the Christians in China. This is a really good psalm for Christians in Africa where their churches are being bombed. This is a really good psalm for Christians in Ukraine or Russia or whatever, but where there's war and so on. You could say, yeah, that would make sense there, but I didn't feel that way this week. Now, part of this is because God restrains evil, but part of this is also then because we do not see sin for the insolent rebellion and suicidal terrorism that it is. We don't see the evil for as bad as it is. For example, it was something of a shock or surprise for many when the COVID insanity persecuted businesses and churches and medical freedom in 2020 and following. People were sort of shocked and surprised. What are you doing? Why are you acting this way? This seems like you're being evil. You're making people close down their churches, their businesses. You're constraining their freedoms. But tyranny is simply lawlessness. Tyranny is simply lawlessness. I say tyranny, and immediately everybody, you just think of Stalin and Hitler. You think of, totalitarian dictators who are murdering people. That's how we've been trained to think of tyrants or what tyranny is. But strictly speaking, tyranny is simply lawlessness, which means that tyranny can also often be kind of nice and friendly. You can have a nice tyrant, but he's not acting according to the law. He's not in submission to law. He's doing what he wants, and right now he happens to want to be nice. The word tyrant, tyranny, actually the original use of it comes from ancient Greece, where you would have occasionally a kind of constitution or laws agreed upon in an area in Greece, and then a ruler would rise, and at some point the ruler would get tired of those rules, those laws, and would just toss the constitution out. And now he's just ruling kind of as this monarch, and that's where the word tyrant came from. He was the tyrant. He was the chief law. But some of those tyrants the Greeks liked. It wasn't like all of a sudden he took off a mask and he was this monstrous character. But of course, what happened was maybe the first guy was relatively nice, and then maybe the second guy not so much. But the issue is that tyranny is lawlessness. As a roaring lion and a raging bear, so is a wicked ruler over the poor people. Proverbs 28:15. A roaring lion and a raging bear. That's a tyrant. No law, no chains, no cage. Okay, that's a wicked ruler. A roaring lion, a raging bear. If God and his law are not over the state, then you have a lawless state. If God and his law are not over the state, then you have a lawless state, and by definition, even if it's a relatively friendly place, even if it's a relatively nice place to live, it's a tyrannical state. Okay? If they said, we do what we want, there's no law over us, there's no God over us, we do as we want, and they say, and you can buy the house you want to buy and buy the car you want to buy, and so on. They're relatively nice, they're relatively friendly, you can get along okay. Okay, you can be grateful for that, but it's still a lawless state. It's still a tyrannical state. Think about it like this. It's not a great comfort to say that the lion or the bear is not hunting us right now. You're out camping and, there's a grizzly bear. Honey, don't worry, the grizzly bear is not hunting us right now. I don't know that she's really that comforted. Is she sleeping better? Don't worry, the grizzly bear is not hungry right now. Right? There's a cougar, but don't worry, the cougar's not hunting us right now. That's not a great comfort, because everybody knows the grizzly bear, the cougar, at some point gets hungry. At some point decides to attack. It's not guarded, it's not governed, and there's no reason why it can't come get you Okay, that's what lawless government is. A government that does not have a standard over it, a fixed standard that doesn't change. The lion may not be hunting you right now, but it can turn on you in any minute. Many Christians have made peace with a lawless state simply because it hasn't targeted Christians explicitly yet. Many Christians have made peace with a lawless state simply because it hasn't targeted Christians explicitly yet. But every law or policy in defiance of God's law, every law or policy in defiance of God's law is an inherent claim to the right to do whatever they want. And so it usually starts in little things. Maybe it's a dumb building code. Maybe it's a silly health regulation. Maybe it's a tax that's just a little bit more than is just, but it's just a little bit more than is just. And we have different interpretations or whatever. Well, but as soon as you start, they say, but we have the right to demand this. We have the right to require this. And if you don't, we can fine you, we can punish you, and maybe at some point we could take your house away. We could take your car away. We could take your license away. If you don't follow these laws, we can use force to require that. Well, it might be little, but if it's lawless, in principle, they're saying we can do as we please. Now, they may not be brave enough to do as they please everywhere yet, and maybe not everyone wants to do all the other things yet, but that's what it was. That's what it is. Many of us would be, you might sometimes wonder, you're patriotic Americans and you celebrate, the Boston Tea Party or this kind of thing. And you got to remember that this taxes that they were objecting to were minuscule. The taxes that they were objecting to were minuscule compared to what we pay. And the issue was not being taxed because the colonies had their own legislatures that taxed them. They paid taxes, the colonists did. They weren't they were zero taxers. The objection was that government across the sea had signed agreements with their colonies that they could exist with these governments, and those governments that they had formed in their colonies, those were the governments that had the right to tax them, not the British one, not the Parliament. No taxation without representation meant simply only our representatives, and they had some, they're allowed to tax us. Right? We elected them, they're our representatives. You guys in Parliament, maybe nice guys and all, but we didn't elect you, you don't represent us. And that wasn't the agreement we had. The issue then was this is the beginning of lawlessness. You are breaking the law. And if you can break the law on a tiny, 1% tax, and there was a bunch of people that were like, just pay the tax. There was tons of people, just pay the tax, it's not a big deal, Romans 13. Right? But if they can do this, in principle, they can do anything. In principle, if they say this is right and we can require this, then they can do anything. And that's why we exist. Pure democracy is vox populi, vox Dei. The voice of the people is the voice of God. Right? That's pure democracy. Whether we are talking about socialized medicine, sodomite mirage, the abortion carnage, unjust taxation, or something else, it doesn't matter what the people vote for if they are disobeying God. It doesn't matter what the people vote for if they are disobeying God. You can, all the people can hold a vote and say, we voted to suspend gravity. It doesn't matter. Right? God made the world in such a way that gravity exists whether you vote for it or not. The same thing is true about morality. Right and wrong doesn't change. God made the world in such a way that right and wrong is fixed. It is right or it is wrong. It is black, it is white, it is clear, and it doesn't matter if you say, times have changed. No, not when it comes to basic morality, not when it comes to the 10 Commandments. So, we ought to be, and we must be deeply grateful for God's restraining mercy on our land. We have to be. God's been incredibly merciful to our land. We have it good given how bad it is. Right? We have it good given how bad it is. But we have to recognize that we do in fact live in a land full of roaring lions and raging bears. We live in a land full of roaring lions and raging bears. They may not have circled us particularly yet, but there's not any real reason why they couldn't. Many of our rulers do not fear God. They only fear being canceled or not being reelected.